Welcome back to In Your Corner with me, D. It's our third episode, second really by way of content, um, and it's nice to see the subtitles are picking up the accent. Okay, um, glad that it's not too difficult. Um, but I'll do my best to be clear and coherent. Um, but look, if you haven't done it already, please feel free to like, share, subscribe, all that stuff, and connect with other people who might be interested in the content. Again, we just want to create a wee community of healing, promoting hope and a sense of safety. And through the topics that we're going through, we're hoping that that might help you or other people, the very least, your inner child, which is where a lot of the healing comes from my perspective. Um, so this episode is on insecurity. So the themes for the topics begin with I so far, because we want to promote inner healing and um, introspection and self-reflection and doing all the stuff for yourself. Mostly because you can get messages there that you solely need other people to help you out. Now, trained professionals are the way forward, and I strongly promote people going to see a psychotherapist, psychologist, counselor. Mine was a person-centered therapist, and yeah, I put we put the work in. But yeah, in the interim, um, I know that it can feel lonely and isolating. Um, not thinking about this stuff, not talking to other people about this stuff, thinking this stuff's all yours. And yeah, hopefully my experience of healing and healing other people, like I've said before, I spent the guts of nearly 20 years helping other people but myself. So I get very good at helping other people, and I have spent a lot of time now helping myself too. That's through uh, supervision, uh, the person-centered therapy, through reading, journaling, talking to other people, um, getting to understand theory, and yeah, all that stuff, and looking through things through different lenses, interacting with different models, and yeah, kind of firming down my core beliefs and understandings, and the principles from which I act as a professional and personally as a human being. So it's important for me to not be selfish for this stuff and to share anything that may be helpful. And yeah, I hope that resonates with somebody. And please feel like you can get in contact and we can start more of a conversation going. I have a few people lined up. They are willing and able. It's just scheduling at the minute. So we might cover some of the content we've already covered, just from their perspective, and even just getting a bit of dialogue and critiquing it, So I've done my best to do a bit of a SWOT analysis on some of the stuff I've been covering, but again, it's limited when it's just myself, um, and yeah, hopefully it's interesting. I don't want it to feel like a lecture. So, definition of insecurity, by way of the Oxford Dictionary, is a sense of uncertainty or anxiety about oneself, lack of confidence, or the state of being open to danger or threat, and a lack of protection. That's the Oxford Dictionary's definition there. So, um, anxiety about yourself and it being a self esteem or confidence issue, or about safety, danger, threats, not feeling safe, lack of protection. So that's quite relevant um, at this moment in time because of the messages that we receive that so much stuff is unsafe. Um, you read the newspapers or social media, there's a lot of unsafety out there. If it bleeds, it leads. All that. Um, all that stuff's really popular to read, as opposed to nice, positive, helpful content. When I was working with young people with a trauma background, we had went through um, bonds, attachment styles. The four styles could be seen with the following characteristics. So you look at something through the lens of yourself and through the lens of your partner. So if you have a secure attachment, your feelings about yourself and the feelings you have about your partner would be that things are reciprocal, there's mutual and healthy boundaries, and that there's good controlled conflict resolution and just room for the support's mutual. I'd say that reciprocity is there. So it's not about when one person is solely in crisis and the other person is doing all the helping and supporting, and for the other person then to seek some support, the person that's usually in crisis and needing support just isn't available. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it can be difficult. um, so that's why I continue to promote interdependence here. So this being a platform for helping people with that element of interdependence, we can get our needs met by other people, not solely through ourselves. We are social beings. We cannot survive alone, and we shouldn't promote that concept. Which has been dominated by um, neoliberalism, capitalism. Look out for your neighbor, not looking out for your neighbor. Your neighbor is cheating on benefits and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, so we need to be secure in ourselves, and we need to have a secure partner for a real secure attachment. It can be difficult, so it requires a lot of work. but just recognizing some of them characteristics as being necessary can promote you to at least try to be less selfish in those sort of instances. So when you're feeling good about your partner, but you're not feeling so good about yourself, you might be that preoccupied attachment where you are anxious, and you might be fearful of abandonment or rejection, which creates a dependency. So you might sacrifice your needs to fulfill your partner's needs, um, and that might not even necessarily be your partner. Should extend that to your family members, your family members, your friends, just people in your life, or anybody there that is in the healing, supporting, or caring industry, looking after other people. That attachment style exists, where we're so preoccupied in helping other people we forget about ourselves, and that need for validation through helping other people. So we will constantly look for, um, you know, uh, pats on the back, recognition, validation. Um, so it's being aware of that, and finding how to validate yourself, how to feel more positive about yourself, will help bring you towards that more secure attachment, because you're not dependent on that other person to fulfill your needs. You're able to do that yourself, um, but in a more secure way. So the other more dismissive or avoidant style exists when you are feeling negative about your partner or friend or person that you're looking after or caring for, but you're feeling really good about yourself. And how that is characterized as through um, avoidance. So you will avoid um, trusting them. So you feel good about yourself, but you know that they're needy, and you know that you can't trust them to help you, so you will avoid that level of intimacy. You'll avoid that level of trust. Um, there might be communication issues because, you're doing a lot of hearing, but you're not going to do a lot of talking. You're going to be protective over what you share. But again, it's recognizing that and finding ways then that you can support that person to maybe we be a wee bit more trustful. So how do we do that? We can do that through boundaries, and expectations, and being very clear on what hurts you, and what you need, how reciprocal it should be, and maybe finding other avenues for that person to lean on other people, or other support mechanisms. So it's not solely you, otherwise you burn yourself out and then you become avoidant. The last style is the more disorganized and completely fearful um, style. So that exists when you don't feel good about yourself, and you don't have a good level of fear or feelings and trust, or feeling good about the other person, that being your partner or your friend or family member or someone that you're caring for. So that fear um, is toxic and will make sure that you and they have low self-esteem. So it could be a system there where your idea of leaning on each other is by dumping all your crap onto one another and projecting all your insecurities onto each other, like they should be the one that fixes things for you. Like you're dependent on them. Usually find that in somebody that has been hurt before and thinks that it's fair that if the person has had their trust abused, that they continue to distrust them. And yeah, I mean, the kind of people there that were victims start victimizing other people. The person that was cheated on starts, you know, going through their phone and stuff like that. Or the person that's cheated, projects that onto other people. Um, okay, so an example of that secure attachment from more reading in my own practice was through a book by Martha Holden called Children and Residential Experiences, and she talks about a secure base. And she uses an example of two parents at a playground with their child, and one child is climbing all over the climbing frame and going down the slide, and is quite happy, moving about and interacting with other people, and can look up every so often and know that their parents there or their caregivers there, and they're happy enough that they don't need them to be very close. And similarly, the parent knows that anything might happen to their child, but they're within safe distance to intervene if they need to. There's lots of supervision. They're safe in the knowledge that they can respond and not feel entirely responsible if something happens. Like, I know that guilt that happens for some parents. They're afraid for anything happening on their watch. So, the concept then of a helicopter parent. So the other parenting style is that the child walks off and keeps looking back and running back, and maybe even the parents hovering around, kind of holding their hand a lot, and not letting them explore. And if something's said about their child, they're directly in there and stopping that child from experiencing pain and stuff like that. So whilst the second style is one there that we see a lot and we accept a lot, and we don't want children to feel pain, emotional or physical. Otherwise, we're now at a stage now when we're talking about like resilience. And if you think about that child moving off in the world, that's the sort of child that will keep coming back because they're afraid to move out on their own. I've seen that and I've experienced that myself. Difficult to move away and not feel like you have to come back, and all those sort of messages. They do exist, and that is no fault of the parent and their intention, where they're just trying to keep their child safe. So what is the solution there? We are talking about a child that feels safe enough and confident enough to go away on their own and to explore and play and interact. But that also requires a parent or caregiver to also feel safe in themselves, that that is necessary for the child's overall development, that they need to have a few bruised limbs and cuts, and they also need to experience bullying, and they need to find ways in which they can raise their own self-esteem to challenge oppression, and also how to keep themselves safe. So giving them the tools to do all that, which takes time. It's far easier to intervene very quickly and prevent something from happening, rather than letting something happen and picking up the consequences. Now the extreme end of that then is a complete laissez-faire attitude where there is so much ambivalence from the parent that the child has to learn on their own how to look after themselves, and that also creates a level of insecurity. Um, and that's where we experience young people who have emotional neglect or neglect in other ways where they don't feel safe, and they start hoarding things or being overprotective of possessions or food, or they're overprotective of themselves. They're afraid to commit to things, and yeah. So some examples of insecurity that I've certainly observed and experienced have been, there was a fella that I knew for a number of years who was quite short, and was also gay, and had so many ill feelings towards themselves, about their sexuality, about their height. Was always in fights. Had a big family, and probably didn't feel like they fit in very well, and had a lot of role modeling in front of them there of violence and promiscuity and alcohol and drug abuse and stuff like that. And their experience carried with them to their adulthood and their other relationships with other people. So much so they had a complete lack of trust, and yeah, they were the sort of person there who would get into your phone and look through messages, and would have actively tried to break down different relationships, try to manipulate people against each other. Very Machiavellian. And they were also very insecure about their own intelligence. They didn't do well in school academically. So they always used to use that one, I'm not, you might be smart, but I'm street smart kind of stuff, like you don't know anything. So I remember them, saying those sort of things around me anyway, about things that I knew, and would be very quick to try to prove that they were more intelligent in some sort of way, so it's interesting seeing that now, but yeah, they were the sort of person there who must have hated themselves, because they had a lot of anger, and they used to project that anger on the other people. And yeah, I mean, they were so insecure about their own sexuality as well. I remember, them, you know, uh, their gender identity and their sense of masculinity and stuff like that, closely associated with their sexuality, which was bizarre nowadays when you think about it. You wouldn't dare question anybody's gender specifically just because of their sexuality, or their gender identity. We know and we understand that a whole lot better. Your gender expression is completely unique to your sexual orientation, or who you are attracted to, and yeah, your romantic relationships and stuff like that, and then how you behave as well. So yeah, this person here thought that they had to act very macho, and were very misogynistic in a lot of ways, and were definitely promiscuous, and yeah, they used to feel ashamed over the fact that they were passive in a relationship and stuff like that. So um, yeah, it's just interesting to see that insecurity projected onto other people, like So there was someone else there that I can completely see their own insecurity in front of me, um, and it's sad and destructive because they are in a position there of pretending to be a role model. They're in a figurehead kind of position, where they should be promoting the sport, promoting participation, helping other clubs, and yeah, I mean, they are, as I say, like a figurehead. So, um, they're meant to be a good role model, but this sort of person there has taken upon himself to, act like a king. I know we're using that uh, analogy a lot with other politicians, like, but it's funny, even in sport, boxing politics is no different. Um, there's a lot of this person would be the sort of person to promote cronyism, that you all had to be friends and you had to wait your turn, and there's a system there where you had to move your way up, and it had nothing to do with merit. It had nothing to do with your ability to perform. All completely personality based, and this concept there that time served is like the is demonstration of ability and skills, and experience. They gave up a lot of their time over many years, and almost felt entitled to bully other people, essentially, in their position, rather than bring people along. So the sort of person that led from the front, um, and in all fairness, have had no contribution to the sport, from what I can account for anyway. Other than you can say they dedicated a number of years, to the sport. But that's not the same. Um, I can speak for myself. What I've done for the sport, as far as um, you know forming a boxing club, and using the boxing club in different areas to promote the sport and get people active, reaching out to different other community organizations, different demographics, done a lot of cross community work, and done work, with people with impairments, learning difficulties, and other marginalized groups, more recently, LGBTQ community, so that is something I can, testify as something that I've contributed. Unfortunately, this person, how is their insecurity displayed? So there would be meetings there that we would have to attend to, and rather than finding ways of getting people to work together, and rather than promoting anything that was good and worthwhile, and was different, and also anything there that was critical, so if there's anything that was disagreed upon, the concept there that we should be exploring and balancing things out, and you know critical feedback is about improvement and stuff like that. So they were not receptive of that sort of stuff. It was always a very long arm approach. They just wanted to get themselves in photos, hold the title, and in any way that they could, they would be. Yeah, I mean, I've never been in so many meetings where me as a volunteer and other members of the club were as volunteers were shouted at, which is completely intolerable and disgusting behaviour from somebody who's meant to be a role model. So it's sad to see that that stuff exists. So what's my kind of experience of insecurity? So yeah, look, I'm privileged enough that I'm tall. I'm privileged enough to believe now that I'm intelligent. Um, I'm privileged enough to know that I can defend myself. And yeah, I'm privileged enough to know that, yeah, I'm aware of a number of my privileges. I don't abuse those. Um, I still get smaller people trying to start fights with me. I still get people trying to um, diminish my intelligence. I still get people trying to attack my credibility at being able to defend myself. And that says more about them than it does me. So people who know me know that I'm not the sort of person there to start fights, nor do I have to. Um, you know, words are insignificant to me. When people are trying to agitate me and uh, try to instigate a fight. It means nothing. It's insignificant to me. Um, I'm able to walk away. So I'm secure enough in my own masculinity that I don't feel I have to. I'm secure enough in my masculinity. I don't feel like I have to display any other kind of behavior or do anything or shy away from it. Like look at where I'm living. My partner decorated this, and uh, people might have believed there that I would have had a problem with it, but it doesn't. It doesn't mean anything, to my sense of masculinity or theirs. So, and something else, with where I was feeling insecure about. So, I talked about getting bullied, and my experience of school, and where I was at growing up, and while I saw that was going on, I was still unsure of my own sexuality, and no, well, maybe not necessarily unsure about my own sexuality, just not authentic about it and open and transparent about it and out. And I also was very sick, and I also, had been in a very I've been in an environment there, the boxing community, which, as I kind of alluded to, was very unsafe, from certain figureheads and stuff like that. Very toxic. But my experience of boxing has been largely positive. Like, so feelings of insecurity that I had, that I've worked on, and come at the other end of, have been the likes of being younger in the boxing community, and it was never really people in the boxing community would give you this message, like, but being around other young fellas who knew that you boxed, and they were the sort of people there that would have said to you, "Oh, you can't fight," or were interested in your titles and stuff like that. And looking back, despite titles that I have and needing them at the time maybe to feel more secure in my ability, it's funny to look back and see that these people had no medals of their own, had never set foot in a boxing club, had never really never really been hit, and yet they were the sort of people to question your credibility. So yeah, I spent many years continue to feel like I had to prove something to other people, and then had to prove something to myself. So I continued. I continued competing for a long time, after I probably should have. I say should have because I didn't need to. I know knowing myself, there's nothing that anybody could have taken anything away from me. But when you've had a lot of your health taken away from you, and you're feeling fit, and the longer you're in boxing, the more experience you gain, and through coaching other people, the more skills I really focused on, because I had to get it right to teach other people how to do it right. So there's always tests in your own head there where you feel like, I want to test myself again. I suppose that's quite natural enough for some people, but you shouldn't need to have to do that, and I know that now myself. Something there I worked through in therapy was I never really was the sort of person to throw the first punch, in a kind of metaphorical way. I always felt like I boxed defensively. I never felt like I was the aggressor, and that was a psychological thing. I'd say that sense of being a victim and having my back up and defending myself was carried over into the boxing ring more than it did, and through the rest of my life. So something I worked on the very last time I was in the ring competitively, and the very last time in the ring I can now. I am officially too old to box. So the last time I got in there, it was transformational for me because I went in to really do harm, and to go out and to really throw punches with all your power and all your intention to do harm, is permitted in the sport. I really wanted to go in there and consensually hurt somebody, basically. Well, I wanted to go in there knowing that we were two consenting adults in the sport of boxing who were engaged in attacking each other, and through the sport I was permitted to hurt them if I wanted to, and I suppose I went in there to not let the contest go longer than 3 rounds if I could help it. I really wanted to go in there and do some damage, and that's probably alien for people to hear me say that, and that was my intention, and that's what I went in to do. And I really tapped into something there that I needed to, because there was a physiological change, definitely, for me. I have been a different person since. I Yeah, I'm not the sort of person there who's afraid, basically. And yeah, look, yeah, big transformation for me. Um, so some of the other insecurities there that they played out for me were, my feelings of worthiness and uh, worthiness and my intelligence and my belief that I deserve good things, or at least deserve to finish things, so um, part of Gabermati's interpretation of ADHD is that dissociativeness is important for survival. When you're under stress, being able to dissociate, is like that flee or even freeze. So I would freeze in my thinking, and I would distract myself and be impulsive and wanting to do other things. So start lots of things but fail to finish them. So the dopamine's going the wrong way. The dopamine's meant to reward yourself for tasks completed, where I'm finding it in different things, like gaming or helping other people rather than helping myself, because it's easier to do that than it was to help myself. So the likes of my degree has, uh, yeah, the likes of my degree it was a big challenge, and the rest of my studies is continuing to be will continue to be a challenge, and there are other things out there that I'm aiming to do, that will continue to challenge me, but again it comes from that sense of worth, and you know what happened in school meant that I didn't really see things through, and that's something I'm actively working on at this moment of time. But that insecurity, yeah, that insecurity, yeah, still shows up. I never thought I would be able to achieve so well academically, um, but I have, and I never thought I would perform as well as I have in my profession, but I have, and I always felt that you had to humble yourself a lot, so I don't feel like the conversations I have with people alienate anybody. Um, if they're feeling intimidated, I have to accept that that's their insecurity, not mine. But I do my best to adapt around that, and not abuse that sense of privilege, for me. Another small insecurity that I've worked on before was so in my household we did a lot of boxing and swimming, and there were nights there throughout the week that I would have trained and wouldn't have known that well. Like growing, like when you're a child, your parents are mostly promoting your hygiene. So they would be the ones who were like, you're getting a shower or it's bath time and all that sort of stuff. So it got to a point then where I was training so much, I didn't realize that I must have um, needed a shower more than I was conscious of, and especially you reach a certain age too, hormonally, these things sort of kick in too, like, so you do become a smelly teenager and you need to wash more, where I wasn't self-aware of that fact. So it took some of my class to say stuff, and at the time I took it a bit bad, but in all fairness, it was the best thing for me. But it shows up now where I wash a lot, or at least I'm very conscious of how I smell, and I don't think anybody that knows me would say that I smell bad, because I've developed quite a cologne collection, and I'm quite particular with the aftershaves and cologne, the fragrances that I have, like, so um, I would say I smell very good. But that comes as a direct result of a time in my life not smelling so good. So for my classmates, I want to thank you for that. It was certainly helpful feedback at the time, like, but it's funny now. It didn't feel so funny at the time, but it's something I can take complete ownership of. That might have been an insecurity, but I'm aware of it. Like, so I'm just reclaiming something that was stolen from me, in a lot of ways. So what are some solutions? So, speaking from my own experience, getting the help, um, doing the journaling, doing the shadow work. If you don't know what that is, look up Carl Jung. You can do it through Harry's window. So what do you see? What do other people see? And what do they not see? And kind of work on the shadow self. Work on the stuff people don't see, that you're aware of, that needs attention, because it shows up in different ways, such as your own insecurities. So you can do that. Be kind to yourself. Meditate. Gratification. Being aware of your privileges. And okay, so a top-down solution from my perspective would be, again, some role models. So the sort of role models that we have at the moment aren't positive. They're projecting a lot of their own insecurity onto other people. You have to look at how people in positions of power are currently, abusing that power, and projecting their feelings on the other people, specifically like marginalized groups, like, So we need more role models that are secure enough in themselves to share their insecurities, and at this moment in time, people are afraid to do that. I mean, you only have to look at, like, Instagram, and when we were talking about people like getting photoshopped or airbrushed and all that sort of stuff, they're all insecurities. We should try to find a way of owning them, and not being afraid, um, not being afraid of just not being afraid. So we're putting out there in the world that everything is absolutely a-okay, when it's okay not to be okay. We're putting it out there. Also, lots of messages of a lack of safety. So that lack of safety feeds into insecurity. You know, um, you know, we're trying to make it look like we have to act and behave and display certain things to get what we want. And that's not entirely accurate. There's a sense of privilege for some people that they have that just completely supersedes and circumvents this notion that if you work hard, you'll get what you want. And the only way to get what you want is through hard effort and stuff. Like, it's not it doesn't work like that. People are exploiting those messages, like pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and all that. There, it's a lie. It really is a lie. You can look back there in the early 2000s when we really had fly on the wall, real um, people on TV, and yeah, they were boring, and that was okay. They try to find ways then of creating conflict and creating scandal, and there were people there that really saw themselves on TV. The likes of Jay Goody and stuff like that. They were people that were relatable for the people watching TV. They felt very real. And then what they did to Jay Goody was they created a social, not a social media monster, like this is long before social media, but they created a monster just by how they treated her. This working class hero turned into this vilified mum then, who apparently wasn't worthy of her kids and stuff. But that again is just like a class conflict sort of thing. The media always wanted to attack people like that, and almost remind them of where they were from. This sort of stuff about fake celebs. What were they famous for? Going on X Factor and making an idiot of themselves or something. So on one hand, it was real and it was worth seeing all that. So you had all these real people that were on TV for the first time, and they didn't know what to do with them. They didn't know how to celebrate them, and they didn't know how to celebrate their own success in that kind of way. And people would question why were they successful. Successful for being on a show and making a fool of himself and stuff like that. But they needed that adulation, they needed that validation, they needed to be seen and heard and stuff like that. And we exploited them by watching them and feeding the beast that was these producers that created these shows to exploit that need for voyeurism almost, and trying to relate ourselves with other people and stuff like that. But they're human beings at the end of the day. And it's tragic what's happened to some of these real human beings who have been destroyed with wanting to seek that sense of fame and admiration, and their insecurities played out on screen. So that's the dangerous element of things. Um, but it continues now where people are so afraid to show any kind of fault. People are so afraid um, also of what they say, and I understand why. You know, um, the people that are considerate of what they say are vilified in ways, where the people who aren't afraid of what they say are almost spearheading hate speech, really. But in any case, how do we help with feelings of insecurity? Again, role models. We could do it through sport, and sport is a great vehicle for creating feelings of success and stability and goal setting. Things now that have to be taught to people are very clear when you engage in a sport. So you talk about your short term goals, your long term goals. You have to break things down into easier, manageable steps. You don't immediately put somebody into a situation that they won't be able to achieve. So it's all good coaches will cultivate opportunities for somebody to learn. So in my time as a coach, I always promoted the concept that you either win or you learn. You only lose if you don't learn anything. So every time you got into a boxing ring, you should have learned something at least, and that was always going to be a win. So good coaches are necessary. Sport is necessary. A lot of people are not engaging in sport as much as they used to, and I don't know if that's coming from parents fearing their child being afraid to fail, or being hurt. I know for boxing, people are so afraid of their child getting hurt, and that's understandable. But it's a very controlled sport, and in terms of injuries, you're talking about somebody getting hit in the head, very few and far between, compared to heading a ball or getting tackled on a rugby field, or potentially getting struck by a horse. There's more fatalities on the rugby field and in horse riding than there are in boxing, and even on the football field and Gaelic field now, with people not getting tested for heart defects and stuff. First thing you need whenever you engage in boxing is you need to be medically fit, so you're taken through a medical. So I would strongly promote people getting into boxing at least, or getting into sport. We've got people out there who are dedicated to helping children succeed. Good coaches anyway will do that. And success is unique to every individual. It's a journey, not a destination. So everybody's potential will be different. But cuts to sport, culture, arts, leisure, they're all having an impact now on people's self-esteem and confidence and being able to work things out. Gail, I know, would always say the solution to every problem is art, and creative thinking is probably the best way of solving a lot of problems, thinking outside the box. So these are the first things that have gotten cut, and they are the things that have had a knock-on effect on people's education, their health, and their overall sense of self, safety, and well-being. You think that taking away money from sport and arts and culture and leisure won't have an impact, but it does. It was the first thing we went for during the lockdowns. It was the only thing that was helping us out of that pandemic. We need to get money back into those areas, and we also need strong messages that it's okay not to be okay. We need messages there that nothing is perfect. It's okay to feel, all this stuff about, hard work and all that. It almost sort of means then if people aren't working, they're not successful because they're not working hard, which is not true. We just need to be clear on how people get there, and I suppose that's not the messages people get. They don't get to see how people got there, even if it is ugly. So a bottom up way of doing things would be to again work on individuals, groups of people. My kind of work, working with young people, great way of breaking the cycle. Giving people a sense of safety and self-esteem, confidence, and stuff like that, and that'll break the cycle. Fixing it when they're young means then that this insecurity won't show up later on in life. I hope so anyway. So giving them the tools to overcome challenges, building on resilience, and yeah, just having a good set of values that you can install in people, and putting messages out there, verbally, social media and stuff like that. But we would have messages in our spaces, that promote affirmation and gratitude, and help boost people's confidence. Teaching people how to make SMART goals. Yeah, there's all stuff there that can be done from the bottom up, but to really get up there, we need to be speaking truth to power still. We need to be voting. We need to be holding. Everybody says holding your politicians to account. It doesn't mean you have to punish them. It just means that you are writing to them. Not everybody writes. They just like to put messages out on social media and stuff. That isn't the same as writing to your politician. That is how things change. And overall, just again, promoting safety. It's that element of safety and security that shows up later on in life as insecurity. So, yeah, more messages of hope and safety. So, I hope this has been helpful, and you are hopeful. And please like, share, subscribe, all that sort of stuff. But please interact, ask questions, or come on, and we can have a conversation. And just know that you're not on your own. But if you're feeling alone, I'm in your corner.